Have you ever looked around and noticed that some people seem to have very few friends or none at all? At first glance, it's easy to make assumptions. Maybe they're antisocial, maybe they're arrogant, maybe they don't know how to connect with people, maybe they're lonely. But what if those assumptions are completely wrong? What if having few friends isn't always a sign of weakness? What if, in some cases, it reveals something much deeper about a person's personality? Because the truth is that not everyone experiences relationships the same way. Some people thrive in large social circles. They enjoy constant interaction, frequent communication, being surrounded by people. Others are different. They move through life more quietly, more selectively, more carefully. And while society often treats popularity as a measure of success, psychology tells a much more interesting story. Some of the most thoughtful, self-aware, and emotionally complex individuals often have surprisingly small social circles, sometimes by choice, sometimes by circumstance, and sometimes because their personality naturally makes superficial relationships difficult to maintain. Today we're exploring 5 personality traits commonly found in people who don't have many friends. And before we begin, it's important to understand something. This discussion isn't about judging people, it's about understanding them. Because many people who appear isolated from the outside are experiencing something very different on the inside. And by the end of this conversation, you may see solitude in a completely new way. The first personality trait is deep selectiveness. Most people assume friendships happen naturally. You meet someone, spend time together, build a connection, and eventually become friends. For many individuals, that's exactly how it works. But highly selective people operate differently. They don't simply look for company, they look for compatibility. For them, friendship is not about quantity, it's about quality. They aren't interested in collecting acquaintances. They're interested in finding genuine connections, people they can trust, people they can be themselves around, people who align with their values. This sounds admirable, and it is, but it comes with a cost. The more selective someone becomes, the fewer people meet their standards. Imagine someone who values honesty deeply, authenticity deeply, loyalty deeply, meaningful conversation deeply. They may encounter hundreds of people throughout their lives, yet only connect with a handful, not because they dislike others, because meaningful compatibility is rare. Many people misinterpret this behavior. They assume the person is distant, judgmental, closed off. But often the opposite is true. The selective person values connection so much that they're unwilling to settle for relationships that feel empty. And in a world filled with surface-level interactions, that can leave them standing alone more often than expected. The second personality trait is overthinking. Now, overthinking has a bad reputation. People often treat it as purely negative. But overthinking is usually a byproduct of something else: awareness, curiosity, reflection, the tendency to examine situations deeply. People who overthink rarely experience life at the surface. They analyze, observe, question, reflect. A casual conversation may continue replaying in their mind hours later. A small interaction may spark pages of internal dialogue. A subtle change in someone's behavior may capture their attention immediately. This depth of processing creates advantages. Overthinkers often notice details others miss, patterns others overlook, motivations others ignore. But it also creates challenges. Relationships often require spontaneity, ease, comfort with uncertainty. Overthinkers struggle with these things. They may second-guess messages before sending them, analyze friendships for signs of change, worry about misunderstandings, question whether they're being accepted or tolerated. Over time, these mental habits can make social interaction exhausting. Not because people are exhausting, because the mind never stops working. And eventually, many overthinkers begin choosing solitude, not because they dislike people, but because solitude feels simpler than managing endless internal analysis. The third personality trait is strong independence. This trait is frequently misunderstood. When people hear the word independence, they often imagine confidence, strength, self-reliance. And while those qualities are certainly involved, Independence can also influence relationships in unexpected ways. Highly independent people become comfortable solving problems alone, making decisions alone, handling challenges alone, processing emotions alone. They develop an internal sense of capability, a belief that they can navigate life without constant support. This mindset creates resilience, but it can also create distance, because friendship often grows through interdependence, through shared experiences, shared vulnerabilities, shared reliance. The highly independent person sometimes struggles with this, not because they don't care about others, because asking for help feels unnatural. Depending on people feels unfamiliar. Opening up feels uncomfortable. As a result, others may perceive them as distant, even when they genuinely value connection. The irony is that independent people often care deeply about their relationships. They simply express that care differently. They don't always seek attention. They don't always reach out first. They don't always communicate their needs. And over time, this can unintentionally reduce the number of close relationships they maintain. Another interesting aspect of independence is that it changes how people view loneliness. Many people fear being alone. Independent individuals often become comfortable with it. They learn how to enjoy their own company, pursue their interests, explore their thoughts, develop their identity, without needing constant social stimulation. This comfort with solitude is often mistaken for isolation. But the two are not the same thing. Isolation is painful disconnection. Solitude is chosen connection with oneself. And understanding that difference is crucial, because many people with few friends are not lonely at all. They're simply content. The fourth personality trait is heightened observation. Some people move through life participating in every conversation, every activity, every social opportunity. Others spend more time observing, watching, listening, studying, not because they're shy, because they're naturally curious about human behavior. Observers notice things, tiny things, changes in tone, changes in body language, inconsistencies between words and actions, the emotions hidden beneath conversations, the motivations hidden beneath decisions. This awareness can be incredibly valuable, but it also changes social experiences. Observers often become aware of things others ignore: insincerity, manipulation, hidden tension, performative behavior. And once you start noticing these patterns, some social environments become less appealing. The observer may find themselves withdrawing from interactions that feel superficial, not because they're better than others, because authenticity matters to them. Many observers would rather spend an evening alone than spend hours pretending to enjoy conversations that feel meaningless. And while this preference protects their energy, it can also reduce their social circle significantly, because authentic connections are harder to find than casual ones. This brings us to an important realization. Many people with few friends aren't rejecting connection. They're rejecting inauthentic connection. And that distinction changes everything, because it reveals that solitude is not always the absence of social opportunity. Sometimes it's the result of intentional choices, choices guided by values, standards, and a desire for genuine relationships. But the fifth personality trait may be the most surprising of all, because it's the one trait that quietly influences all the others. The trait that explains why some people can spend years with very few friends and still feel completely at peace. And once you understand it, you'll never look at solitude the same way again. And that's exactly where our story continues, because the fifth personality trait is something most people rarely talk about. Yet it quietly shapes the lives of countless individuals who have very few friends. That trait is a strong inner world. At first, this may not sound particularly significant. After all, everyone has thoughts. Everyone has imagination. Everyone has interests. But for certain people, their inner world becomes extraordinarily rich, rich enough to compete with the outside world itself. These individuals spend a great deal of time thinking, reflecting, learning, creating, questioning, exploring ideas, analyzing experiences, imagining possibilities. Their minds are constantly active, not in a chaotic way, in a deeply engaging way. And because of this, they don't rely on constant social interaction for stimulation. Many people depend heavily on external activity to feel fulfilled. Conversations, events, entertainment, social gatherings, distractions. But individuals with strong inner worlds often find fulfillment elsewhere. A book can occupy their attention for hours. A new idea can fascinate them for days. A personal project can absorb their energy for months. A single question can inspire endless curiosity. As a result, they often appear different from those around them. While others are searching for the next social event, they're exploring a new subject. While others seek constant companionship, they're pursuing personal growth. While others fear silence, they're comfortable inside it. This doesn't mean they dislike people. It simply means their relationship with solitude is different. Solitude doesn't feel empty. It feels productive, meaningful, even enjoyable. And this creates a fascinating challenge, because society often assumes that social popularity equals happiness. We're surrounded by messages that suggest successful people always have large networks, large friend groups, constant activity, constant connection. But reality is much more complicated. Some people genuinely thrive in highly social environments. Others thrive in quieter ones. Neither approach is inherently superior. They're simply different. Unfortunately, people with few friends often face judgment. Others may wonder what's wrong, why they spend so much time alone, why they aren't constantly socializing, why their circle is so small. These assumptions can be frustrating because they ignore an important truth. The size of someone's social circle tells you very little about the quality of their life. A person can have hundreds of friends and still feel lonely. Another can have two close friends and feel deeply connected. Connection is not measured by numbers, it's measured by depth, trust, authenticity, meaning. And people with strong inner worlds often prioritize those qualities above everything else. This leads to something interesting. As they get older, many of these individuals become even more selective, not less. Life teaches them valuable lessons. They learn which relationships nourish them, which relationships drain them, which relationships support growth, which relationships create stress. And over time, they become increasingly intentional about where they invest their energy. This process sometimes causes their social circle to shrink. But shrinking isn't always loss. Sometimes it's refinement. Think about a sculptor creating a masterpiece. They don't add endlessly. They remove. They chip away everything unnecessary until only what truly matters remains. Many people's social lives follow a similar pattern. As maturity develops, quantity often becomes less important than quality. And this is especially true for individuals who possess the 5 traits we've discussed: deep selectiveness, overthinking, strong independence, heightened observation, and a rich inner world. Together, these characteristics create a unique personality profile, a profile that naturally experiences relationships differently. But here's where things become even more interesting. These traits often produce an unexpected side effect. People who have few friends frequently develop a strong relationship with themselves. Now that may sound obvious, but it's actually quite rare. Many people spend their lives surrounded by others while barely knowing themselves. Their schedules are full. Their phones are constantly buzzing. Their attention is always directed outward, toward other people, other opinions, other expectations, other distractions. They rarely spend enough time alone to truly understand who they are. But individuals with smaller social circles often have no choice. Solitude creates opportunities for self-discovery. It forces reflection, self-examination, personal growth. It encourages people to confront questions they might otherwise avoid. What do I truly want? What do I believe? What matters most to me? Who am I when nobody is watching? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they are also transformative. And many people with few friends become surprisingly self-aware because they spend significant time engaging with them. This self-awareness often becomes one of their greatest strengths. They know their values, their boundaries, their interests, their limitations, their goals. Not perfectly, of course. Nobody knows themselves perfectly. But they often possess a deeper level of self-understanding than people assume. Ironically, this self-awareness sometimes makes social interaction more difficult, because once you know yourself well, pretending becomes harder. Small talk feels less satisfying. Performative behavior feels more obvious. Relationships built on appearances feel less meaningful. As a result, these individuals may withdraw from social situations that others find enjoyable, not because they're antisocial, because authenticity matters more to them than participation. And authenticity is not always easy to find. Another misconception is that people with few friends lack social skills. Sometimes that's true, but often it isn't. Many highly selective individuals are perfectly capable of socializing. They're capable of building friendships, capable of maintaining conversations, capable of connecting with others. They simply choose carefully. They don't automatically invest emotional energy into every opportunity. They don't chase every connection. They don't prioritize social quantity. And from the outside, this restraint can be mistaken for inability, but they're not the same thing. Choosing not to engage is different from being unable to engage. This distinction matters because it challenges one of society's most common assumptions, the assumption that everyone wants the same social experience. The truth is they don't. Some people feel energized by crowds. Others feel energized by solitude. Some people thrive in large groups. Others thrive in intimate conversations. Some people need constant interaction. Others need space to think. Neither approach is wrong. The problem begins when people judge themselves according to standards that don't match their personality. Someone with a naturally selective nature may feel defective because they don't have dozens of friends. Someone who enjoys solitude may feel abnormal because society celebrates extroversion. Someone who values depth over quantity may wonder if something is wrong with them. But often, nothing is wrong at all. They're simply different, and difference is not deficiency. In fact, many of history's most creative thinkers, writers, inventors, philosophers, and visionaries spent significant portions of their lives alone, not because they hated people, because solitude gave them something valuable: space, space to think, space to create, space to understand, space to become. This doesn't mean everyone with few friends is a misunderstood genius, but it does remind us that solitude and failure are not synonymous. A small social circle is not automatically a problem to be solved. Sometimes it's a reflection of priorities, personality, values, life experiences, or personal preferences. And understanding this can be incredibly liberating, especially for people who constantly compare themselves to others. Because comparison creates unnecessary suffering. You see someone surrounded by friends and assume they're happier, more fulfilled, more successful, but appearances rarely tell the full story. Everyone is navigating life differently. Everyone has different emotional needs, different personalities, different definitions of fulfillment. The goal is not to become more like everyone else. The goal is to understand yourself well enough to build a life that fits who you are. And that brings us to perhaps the most important lesson of all. Having few friends is not inherently good, and it's not inherently bad. What matters is whether your relationships align with your emotional needs. If you're lonely and disconnected, that's worth addressing. Humans need connection, meaningful connection. But if your circle is small and your life feels meaningful, fulfilled, and authentic, then the number itself becomes largely irrelevant. Because friendship is not a competition. Connection is not a popularity contest. And self-worth is not determined by how many people have access to your life. The people who matter most are rarely the most numerous. They're the most genuine, the most loyal, the most supportive, the most authentic. And for many individuals, finding those rare connections takes time. Sometimes years, sometimes decades. But when they do find them, the value is immeasurable. So the next time you meet someone who has very few friends, resist the urge to make assumptions. You may be looking at someone who values depth over popularity, Authenticity over appearances, meaning over quantity. You may be looking at someone who has learned how to enjoy their own company, someone who knows themselves deeply, someone who has chosen quality over convenience, or perhaps someone who is still searching for the right people. Either way, their story is likely more complex than it appears, because behind many small social circles lies a personality shaped by selectiveness, reflection, independence, observation, and a rich inner world. And once you understand that, you begin seeing solitude not as something to fear, but as something that, for the right person, can become a source of strength, a source of growth, and sometimes a source of peace.